Ladies and gentlemen, today we're diving into a story that's as enchanting as it is heartbreaking. A tale of a legend whose final bow was hidden from the world for decades. Fred Astaire, the man who redefined dance, whose grace and elegance made him a Hollywood icon, had a secret. A secret so well guarded that even his most ardent fans had no idea it existed. But now, after years of being buried in obscurity, his final performance has surfaced, and it's nothing short of a revelation. So, sit back, because this isn't just a story about a dance. It's a story about love, legacy, and the quiet farewell of a man who gave the world so much joy. Let's start at the beginning. Fred Astaire wasn't always the suave, debonair figure we remember. Born Frederick Austerlitz in Omaha, Nebraska in 1899, he came from humble beginnings. His parents, German-Austrian immigrants, had dreams of a better life, but they could never have imagined that their son would one day become one of the most celebrated entertainers in history. Fred's older sister, Adele, was the first to show promise. She had a natural talent for singing and dancing, and their mother, Johanna, saw an opportunity. She decided that both her children would train in the performing arts. Fred, however, wasn't initially interested. He was more focused on copying his sister's steps than forging his own path. But as he watched Adele practice, something clicked. He realized he could dance just as well as she could, and soon he was hooked. The family moved to New York City in 1905 when Fred was just 6 years old. It was a bold move, especially since they had little money and no guarantees of success. But Johanna was determined. She enrolled Fred and Adele in the Alvine Master School of the Theater and Academy of Cultural Arts, where they learned dance, acting, and music. Fred also picked up instruments like the piano, accordion, and clarinet, skills that would later make him a more versatile performer. Their first performance together was in a small theater in Keyport, New Jersey. Fred wore a top hat and tails for one part of the show and a lobster costume for another. It was an odd mix, but audiences loved it. Soon they were traveling across the country, performing on the vaudeville circuit. Their mix of comedy and dance helped them stand out, but it wasn't always easy. Adele hit a growth spurt in her teenage years and grew taller than Fred, making their performances look awkward. Strict child labor laws also complicated things, forcing the family to take a 2-year break from show business. But when they returned, they were more polished than ever. They studied new dance styles, including tap and ballroom, under renowned instructor Aurelio Coccia. Adele's natural charm still won audiences over, but Fred's technical skill became more refined. His movements were smooth, sharp, and perfectly timed. Over time, he started standing out in a way that even Adele couldn't match. By 1917, Fred and Adele made their Broadway debut in Over the Top, a patriotic revue performed during World War I. It didn't take long for audiences to notice their charm, humor, and flawless dance routines. Their big breakthrough came in 1924 with Lady Be Good, a musical featuring songs by George and Ira Gershwin. This show was a turning point in musical theater, introducing a jazz-influenced style that felt fresh and sophisticated. Critics praised them for their grace and humor, and by this time, they were one of the most exciting sibling acts on Broadway. Their chemistry was undeniable. They combined elegance with light-hearted humor, something few dancers could pull off. One of their most popular routines was called the runaround, where they would link arms as if riding bicycles and run in circles around the stage before vanishing into the wings. It was playful and effortless, and audiences loved it. But everything changed in 1932 when Adele retired from performing to marry Lord Charles Cavendish, the son of the Duke of Devonshire. It was the end of an era. Fred, who had spent nearly his whole life dancing beside his sister, now had to step into the spotlight alone. At first, the adjustment wasn't easy, but it opened new doors for him. His first major solo success came that same year with Gay Divorce, a show that introduced a romantic dance style that would later define his Hollywood career. It was also during this time that he collaborated with Cole Porter on Night and Day, a performance that would become one of his most famous. Fred Astaire arrived in Hollywood in 1933, ready to prove himself. But his first screen test at RKO Pictures didn't go well. The feedback was brutal. Can't sing, can't act, slightly balding, can dance a little. A review like that could have ended his career before it started, but Fred didn't let it. David O. Selznick, the producer who signed him, wasn't completely convinced either. He wrote in a memo that Fred had enormous ears and a bad chin line, but admitted there was something about him. His charm is so tremendous that it comes through even on this wretched test. That charm would soon make him one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. His first film appearance came that same year in Dancing Lady, where he danced alongside Joan Crawford. It wasn't a big role, but it got him noticed. When he returned to RKO, he was cast in Flying Down to Rio. He wasn't the lead, he had fifth billing, but when he stepped onto the screen, everything changed. Critics called him distinctly likable and said that as a dancer, he remained in a class by himself. Audiences loved him, and Hollywood had just found its new star. That film also introduced something else, his partnership with Ginger Rogers. They weren't the main attraction in Flying Down to Rio, but their dance together stole the show. Their performance of the karaoke, where they danced with their foreheads touching, became an instant hit. At first, Fred wasn't interested in teaming up again. He had spent years dancing with his sister Adele on stage and wanted to work solo. He even wrote to his agent saying, "I will not have it. I did not go into pictures to be teamed with her or anyone else." But audiences wanted more, and the studio pushed for it. Between 1933 and 1939, Fred and Ginger starred in 9 films together, including The Gay Divorcee, 1934, Top Hat, 1935, and Swing Time, 1936. Their chemistry was effortless, and their routines felt like magic. Katharine Hepburn once described their appeal perfectly. He gives her class, and she gives him sex appeal. Their films weren't just popular, they were massive box office hits. 6 of their 9 RKO musicals were among the studio's highest-grossing films at the time. But their influence went beyond ticket sales. Fred, along with choreographer Hermes Pan, changed the way dance was used in film. It wasn't just about impressive footwork, it was storytelling. Every step, every movement, every routine had meaning. 2 of their most iconic films, Top Hat, 1935, and Swing Time, 1936, showcased everything that made them great. In Top Hat, Fred played Jerry Travers, an American dancer who falls for Dale Tremont, played by Ginger. The film featured Irving Berlin's classic songs including Cheek to Cheek and Top Hat, White Tie and Tails. One of the most famous scenes showed Fred using his cane like a gun, miming the act of shooting down a chorus line. Even for him, it was a challenge. It took multiple takes to get right, even though he usually preferred long, unbroken shots. The film became a huge success, and it was later recognized by the Library of Congress as culturally significant. Then came Swing Time. Many critics consider it their best film together. It included unforgettable numbers like Pick Yourself Up and Never Gonna Dance. That last routine was one of the most difficult they ever filmed. It took 47 takes to perfect. The precision, the emotion, the sheer effort behind every movement made it one of the most memorable dance sequences in history. Fred was a perfectionist. He didn't just perform, he controlled everything. He worked on choreography, influenced music composition, and made sure the camera angles captured every step the right way. Unlike modern musicals that rely on quick cuts, he believed dance should be filmed in full-body shots with as few edits as possible. Even his tap sounds had to be flawless. After 1935's Roberta, he started re-recording all his taps in post-production. No one else in Hollywood was doing that. His rehearsals were just as intense. He started preparing months in advance and required 6 extra weeks of rehearsals, practicing from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day. Ginger Rogers once joked about how sore her feet were from endlessly rehearsing in high heels. After his legendary run with Ginger Rogers, Fred kept dancing and found new partners who could match his style. One of his most memorable collaborations was with Rita Hayworth in You Were Never Lovelier, 1942. The film had all the charm of a classic Hollywood romance, with Fred playing an American dancer mistaken for a secret admirer of Maria Acuna, played by Rita. But what made it truly special was their chemistry. Fred often called Rita his favorite dance partner, praising her natural grace and ability to match his footwork. Rehearsing for the film wasn't always glamorous. They practiced in a room above a funeral parlor and had to stop whenever a procession passed by. It was an unusual setting for 2 of Hollywood's most elegant dancers, but they made it work. When the cameras rolled, their performances looked effortless. Fred also worked with Judy Garland in Easter Parade, 1948, a film that almost didn't happen for him. Gene Kelly was supposed to star but injured himself before filming began. With Kelly out, Fred stepped in. He had retired briefly in 1946 but returned for this project, and it turned out to be a massive success. The film became the highest-grossing musical of 1948, featuring unforgettable numbers like Stepping Out with My Baby. On screen, Judy and Fred were a perfect match. She had a warm, lively energy that balanced his refined style. Behind the scenes, things were more complicated. Judy struggled with personal issues, and the film went through changes in leadership. But despite the challenges, the final product became one of MGM's most beloved musicals. By the mid-1940s, Fred thought he was ready to leave Hollywood. During the filming of Blue Skies, 1946, he announced his retirement and even chose Pudding on the Ritz as his farewell number. But retirement didn't last long. 2 years later, Easter Parade pulled him back, and over the next decade, he starred in some of his most celebrated films. One of them was The Bandwagon, 1953, directed by Vincente Minnelli. Fred played Tony Hunter, a fading star trying to reinvent himself. It was a fitting role for him at the time. Hollywood was changing, and Fred had to prove he could still shine. The film featured one of his most iconic performances, Dancing in the Dark, a duet with Sid Charisse in Central Park. Even at 54, Fred moved with the same grace and precision that had made him a star decades earlier. Then came Funny Face, 1957, where he danced alongside Audrey Hepburn. The film blended fashion, romance, and Parisian charm. Fred played a photographer who turns Audrey's character into a model. Their age difference was noticeable, but their chemistry worked. The choreography was designed to complement Audrey's delicate style while still allowing Fred to lead. Numbers like Let's Kiss and Make Up proved that he could evolve with the times. His performances in these films weren't just comebacks, they were reinventions. He was proving that no matter how much Hollywood changed, he would always find a way to stay relevant. Beyond the silver screen, Fred wanted to share his love for dance in a new way. In 1947, he co-founded Fred Astaire Dance Studios in New York City with Charles Casanova, a retired motion picture executive. The goal was to bring professional dance instruction to the public. The studio was an immediate success and soon expanded into a global franchise. Today, there are over 250 locations worldwide. Fred personally helped design the studio's programs, making sure they met his high standards. He believed great dancers weren't born but trained, and he wanted to make sure anyone could learn. His curriculum covered everything from ballroom classics like the waltz and tango to Latin dances such as salsa and cha-cha. Unlike traditional dance schools, his studios combined private lessons with group practice, creating a friendly environment for students. Fred Astaire spent most of his career dazzling audiences with his dance moves, but in the 1960s, he took on a new challenge. He stepped away from musicals and into dramatic roles, something few expected from a man so deeply tied to Hollywood's golden age of dance. His biggest breakthrough in this shift came in The Towering Inferno, 1974. This disaster film, directed by John Guillermin, featured an all-star cast, including Steve McQueen, Paul Newman, and Faye Dunaway. Fred played Harley Claiborne, a charming con-man with a heart. Unlike the slick, confident characters he often played, Claiborne was vulnerable, showing a depth that caught audiences by surprise. His performance was so powerful that he earned his first and only Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. He didn't win, but the recognition was long overdue. He did, however, win the BAFTA Award for Best Actor in a Supporting Role and the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor. The Towering Inferno was the highest-grossing film of 1974, making over $203 million worldwide. It was packed with action, fire, and suspense, but Fred's role added something different. In a movie built on spectacle, his character brought real emotion. Critics praised the way he portrayed grief, especially in the scenes where his character mourns the loss of his love interest, played by Jennifer Jones. Some felt his nomination wasn't just about this role. It was a way for the industry to finally acknowledge his impact on cinema. Even in a genre that wasn't his specialty, he proved he could hold his own alongside some of the biggest names in Hollywood. Fred had already been reinventing himself long before this. In 1958, he made history with An Evening with Fred Astaire, a 1-hour television special that aired live on NBC on October 17th. It wasn't just another variety show. It was the first major television special recorded on videotape in color. This was groundbreaking at the time. Fred, always a perfectionist, made sure it was a production to remember. He performed with Barry Chase, whom he later called one of Voight, his favorite dance partners, and the show featured music from the Jonah Jones Quartet and David Rose's orchestra. The special was a massive success, winning 9 Emmy Awards, including Best Single Performance by an Actor. The response was so strong that it led to 3 more specials in the years that followed. Directed by Bud Yorkin and co-produced by Fred himself, the show blended dance and music in a way that felt fresh and exciting. It also reflected the changing landscape of entertainment. Chrysler, recognizing the power of television, became a major sponsor, featuring their cars in the broadcast. At 59, Fred proved he was still a force in the industry, adapting to new formats and continuing to amaze audiences. But if there was one moment that truly defined his ability to push the limits of performance, it was his famous dance sequence in Royal Wedding, 1951. In this MGM musical, directed by Stanley Donen, Fred performed "You're All the World to Me," a routine where he appeared to dance on the walls and ceiling of a room. Audiences had never seen anything like it. The effect was created using a rotating barrel set, a massive steel structure that turned while the camera and cameraman were strapped into rigs that moved with it. The furniture and props were bolted down or magnetized to keep them in place. This complex setup created the illusion that Fred was floating effortlessly from the floor to the walls and then onto the ceiling. The number was so ahead of its time that decades later, Lionel Richie recreated it for his 1986 music video, Dancing on the Ceiling. Even today, the sequence is considered one of the most innovative dance moments in film history. 15 years earlier, in Swing Time, 1936, Fred and Hermes Pan created another groundbreaking moment with the shadow dance. This time, the innovation came from special effects. During rehearsals, Pan noticed how the stage lights cast multiple shadows of Fred. That sparked an idea. What if Fred didn't just dance with his own reflection, but with multiple versions of himself? To make it work, filmmakers used optical effects. First, Fred danced in front of a blank screen while strong lights cast shadows. These shadows were then filmed separately and optically tripled. Finally, the pre-recorded shadows were combined with footage of Fred dancing live. The shoot lasted 3 days, but the final product was worth it. The shadow dance became one of the most memorable moments in Fred's career. It also earned Hermes Pan an Academy Award nomination for Best Dance Direction. Fred Astaire was more than just a dancer. His life off-screen had love, heartbreak, passion, and even battles over his legacy. In 1933, Fred married Phyllis Livingston Potter, a New York socialite with a young son from a previous marriage. They met at a golf luncheon, a casual meeting that led to a lifelong partnership. They had 2 children together, Fred Jr. in 1936 and Ava in 1942. During these years, Fred's career was at its peak. He starred in Top Hat in 1935 and Swing Time in 1936, films that defined Hollywood's golden era. His dancing looked effortless, but his personal happiness played a role in that ease. His family life gave him stability. Then, in 1954, everything changed. Phyllis was diagnosed with lung cancer. She passed away at just 46 years old. Fred was shattered. He was in the middle of filming Daddy Longlegs in 1955 and nearly walked away from the role. He couldn't imagine performing without her support. For decades after her passing, he stayed single, focusing on his children and career. But life had another surprise waiting. In 1980, at 81 years old, Fred remarried. His new wife was Robin Smith, a professional jockey 45 years younger than him. Their shared love for horse racing brought them together. Smith had made history in 1972 as the first female jockey to ride for Alfred Gwynn Vanderbilt Jr. and even appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Despite their age gap, their connection was real. They stayed together until Fred's passing in 1987. He died in her arms at the age of 88. Outside of Hollywood, Fred had passions that few people knew about. He was obsessed with horse racing and golf. He owned stables, attended races, and stayed deeply involved in the sport. His love for horses wasn't just a pastime. It shaped his life, even leading him to Robin. golf was just as important. He played whenever he could, whether on set breaks or social outings. His love for the game was so strong that it was at a golf event where he first met Phyllis. Fred Astaire spent his life dancing across movie screens. His steps were light, his movements effortless. For decades, he set the standard for grace in Hollywood. But when he made his final on-screen dance appearance, it wasn't in a classic musical. It was on Battlestar Galactica, a science fiction TV show set in space. The episode, The Man with 9 Lives, aired on January 28, 1979. Fred was 80 years old. He played Captain Dimitri Chameleon, a smooth-talking con man pretending to be Starbuck's long-lost father. It was a surprising role for a man known for elegance, yet he fit right in. Even in a futuristic setting, he brought a touch of old Hollywood charm. Fred didn't seek out the role for himself. His grandchildren loved Battlestar Galactica and often talked about it. Their excitement made him curious. Instead of just watching with them, he called producer Donald P. Bellisario to ask if there was a part for him. Bellisario was stunned. He reportedly said, "Mr. Astaire, I will write a 2-hour episode around you." The episode ended up being 1 hour, but it gave Fred a chance to do what he did best: dance. At first, he wasn't sure about it. He hadn't danced on screen in years. Age had slowed him down, and he didn't want to disappoint anyone. But when the cameras rolled, he stepped onto the set with actress Anne Jeffries, who played Caressa Blasey, and performed one last dance. The routine was short and simple, nothing like the dazzling numbers he was known for. Still, it was filled with grace. Every movement carried the elegance that made him a legend. Jeffries became the last woman to dance with him on screen, securing her own place in Hollywood history. For the scene, Fred wore a space-themed costume with an ascot, an accessory he likely chose himself. It was a small detail, but it mattered. Even in a world of spaceships and futuristic settings, he remained himself. His appearance on Battlestar Galactica wasn't about reviving his career. It was for his grandchildren. It was his way of stepping into their world and making them smile. That made it more than just a television moment. It was a farewell to his audience, a quiet goodbye to the art he had mastered. 8 years later, on June 22, 1987, Fred Astaire passed away at the age of 88. The cause was pneumonia. The world lost not just a dancer, but a man who had changed entertainment forever. The tributes came immediately. President Ronald Reagan called him a legend. Mikhail Baryshnikov said he was perfection. Gene Kelly, his longtime friend and rival, honored a man who set the highest standards. Irving Berlin, who had written songs for Fred, described him as irreplaceable. But the most touching tribute came from Fred himself. In his final moments, he turned to his wife, Robin Smith, and made a simple request. He asked her to tell his fans how much they had always meant to him. Even at the end, he was thinking about the people who had supported him, the ones who had watched him dance and believed, if only for a moment, that magic was real. Even after he passed, Fred's name became the center of controversy. In 1997, 10 years after his death, a vacuum cleaner commercial used a digitally altered version of him dancing. Fans were furious. Fred had been clear about his wishes. He had included specific clauses in his will to prevent anyone from using his image for advertisements or unauthorized biographical portrayals. He once said, "I have no particular desire to have my life misinterpreted." His widow, Robin, fought hard to protect his legacy. She filed lawsuits to stop companies from using his likeness without permission. But the issue wasn't just about him. It sparked a larger debate about digital recreations of deceased artists. Some argued that it was a way to introduce legends to new audiences. Others believed it was a violation of their memory.